How far would you run to escape the life that was killing you? The snow fell heavy over the Colorado mountains, swallowing the trail and every trace of the woman struggling through it. Clara Whitmore's breath came in ragged gasps, her once elegant dress torn to ribbons, clinging to her like oil-wet shroud. The cold bit into her skin, but she no longer felt it. Her legs shook beneath her hands raw and bleeding, clutched at branches as she stumbled onward through the white blur. She had been running 4 hours, maybe days. Her legs shook stiff her ball, through the one for binges, through the one quotas, through the one dig since she fled Denver, since she'd left behind the man who meant to be improviding her like property. The storm had come fast, chasing her into the wilderness, and now it was finishing what he had started. "I don't care," she whispered, her force cracking in the wind. "Let it end here." She fell to her knees, the snow soaking her torn skirts. The wind screamed around her, sharp as broken glass. She thought over to her late husband Samuel and the debts he had left behind. She thought of Rusar Hutley, the man who had smiled as he told her she could settle those debts by marrying him. She'd rather freeze than wear his ring. Her strength failed. She collapsed into the drift, the cold creeping up her limbs, like death's gentle hands. The world narrowed to white and silence. For a moment, she almost smiled. Finally, it would be over. But the mountains had other plans. Through the howl of wind came another sound. Faint, rhythmic, growing closer. Hoof beats. Clara's eyes fluttered open, confusion piercing the fog in her mind. For one terrible instant, she thought Hotley's men had found her. She tried to move, but her body refused. She could only lie there, waiting for the end. A shadow loomed above her damn fool woman. A deep voice muttered. Clara tried to focus. I loomed the halakha. The halakha stood over her, broad-shouldered under Usia buffer of Dion wrapped in thick furs of Kaka, Grandaliti Tokaka Nundaka. His eyes, sharp and gray as slate, studied her with both annoyance and concern. He knelt beside her, gloved fingers pressing gently against her neck. Still alive barely, Elias Granger had lived 20 years in these mountains, long enough to know what death looked like. He'd found his share of frozen corpses, miners who underestimated the weather, settlers who'd lost their why, but never a woman like this. The fine fabric of her dress, though torn, spoke of money, city stock, don't of place here in the wilderness. He hesitated. The smart thing would be to move on. Let the Montine claim what it had already taken. But something in her face, something fragile and fierce all at once, wouldn't let him. You're lucky I found you, he muttered, though she couldn't hear him. He whistled sharply. If a sturdy brown horse emerged from the swirling wide, steam rising from its nostrils. Easy, brute, as he lifted the woman's limp body. She was light, too light, and did she aborted him more than the colt. He mounted the horse with her cradled against his chest, her head lolling, against his shoulder, and turned toward home. The ride through the storm felt endless. Elias kept one arm tight around her, sharing what warmth he could. She murmured faintly, words he couldn't catch. Names maybe, or please, Samuel, please. He didn't ask questions. Questions could wait until she lived long enough to answer them. By the time the cabin appeared through the blinding white, Ellis's beard was crusted with ice and his hands were numb. The small log structure looked like salvation and prison owl at once. Dark logs, a single chimney, and a thin trail of smoke curling into the storm. He dismounted, carried her inside, and kicked the door shut behind them. The warmth hit like E-wave. The cabin was simple but tidy. A stone-orned fireplace, a wooden table, 2 chairs, shelves lined with preserved food. His bed stood in the corner, piled high with thick quilts. He laid her there, brushing snow from her hair. Her skin was cold as a stone. Her pulse fluttered weakly at her throat. He built the fire stool high, feeding it until heat rolled through the room. Then he hesitated again. Her clothes were soaked through. If he didn't get them over her, she'd die before morning. Forgive me, he muttered, more to himself than to her, and began to wear it. He stripped the wet layers carefully, professionally. The wet man might treat EP wounded soldier. Beneath the ruined dress were bruises, dark, cruel marks that told stories he didn't want to hear. His jaw clenched. Someone had done this to her. And not long ago, when she was wrapped in dry blankets, he mixed medicine, willow bark for fever, by needle tea for strength. His hands moved with old precision, habits from another life he tried hard to forget. By the time he finished, the cabin was warm, and the woman's breathing had steadied slightly. Ilya sat beside the bed, rifle across his knees, watching her. "Who are you?" he asked the quiet room. "And what kind of hell chased you up here?" The only answer was the crackle of the fire. Hours passed. She stirred once, whispering something he didn't catch, then went still again. Elias fought the pull of sleep. He told himself it was caution. Could be she'd led trouble right to his door, but deep down he knew it wasn't that. He hadn't spoken to another soul in nearly all year. He told in soul in nearly all TPE, nearly or TPZ stranger, filled his cabin with the soft sound of his caution after easing hand, soul have his breathing, he 10-souled, of his caution on 10 salt of his bread, and for reasons he couldn't explain, Knockgate did assault resets that sound 10 salt sold salt frayer. 10 salt sold sold when dawn broke pale and blew through the frost-covered window. He was still there, sitting vigil beside her bed. The woman's eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first, then sharpening on him. For the heartbeat, they just stared at each other. Two survivors, strangers, bound by circumstance and snow. "Where is Ta'amo?" she whispered. Elias leaned forward. "My cabin. You'd have frozen out there another hour." Her leaves trembled. "Then maybe you should have let me." He frowned, not liking the hopelessness in her voice. "Don't say that. Whatever you're running from, it's behind you now." Her eyes filled with tears, but she turned her face away, hiding them. He didn't press her. He just added another look to the fire and said quietly, "You're safe here." For now outside, the storm raged on, sealing them inside that lonely cabin together. Two souls the war that had nearly broken, now forced to share its silence. Neither knew it yet, but the storm had only just begun. The next morning came with silence. The storm had eased, leaving the mountains blanketed in cruel beauty. Inside the cabin, the air smelled of smoke, bane, and something fragile. Hope maybe, though neither of them would have called it that yet. Clara woke slowly, unsure where she was. For a moment, she thought she had dreamed the whole thing. The snow, the flight, the strange man who'd carried her from death. But the rough ceiling above her wasn't her Denver bedroom, and the hefty quilts pressing warmth into her bones weren't hers either. Then she heard the rhythmic sound of wood being split outside. Thud, crack, thud. Each strike steady and sure. She pushed herself up, wincing as bruises protested. Her feet found the rough wooden floor, and she gasped softly when the cold bit at her toes. By the fireplace hung her dress, now clean and drying, its silk sheen dulled by wear. On a nearby chair rested a folded flannel shirt, far too large for her, and beneath it a note written in a strong, careful hand. "Your clothes ain't feet for this weather. Wear these till they are." Clara touched the wards, tracing the ink as if it were proof she still lived. Then she slipped into the shirt, which fell nearly to her knees. The fabric soft from use. It smelled faintly of smoke on cedar. She pulled her hair back, took a deep breath, unstepped outside. The brightness blinded her. Snow stretched 4 miles in every direction, dazzling deadly. Eliza stood all day, few yards from the cabin, his axe rising and falling in an easy rhythm. He worked bareheaded, dark hair dusted with frost, muscles moving beneath all day, wool shirt patched at the elbows. When he noticed her in the doorway, he stopped mid-swing. "You shouldn't be out in the cold yet," he said. "I feel better." He studied her, pale cheeks, trembling hands. Lon shook his head. "You feel better because you're too stubborn to admit you don't." Something in his tone, gruff but not unkind, made her want to smile for the first time in months. "I wanted to thank you," she said softly. "No need." He drove the axe into art log, leaving it standing upright. "Just did what any decent man would." She looked around at the wilderness, at the endless snow and the silence. "Then I think decency is in short supply up here." He gave Ak a short laugh, surprised. "You might be right about that." They went inside together. Elias poured her ear a mug of pine needle tea, its bitter scent sharp and clean. She sipped, trying not to cough. He moved about the cabin with quiet efficiency, feeding the fire, checking trucks hung by the door, and saying little. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable, though. It was something else, an understanding, fragile and wordless. After a while, Clara spoke again. How long was I asleep? 2 days. Sorry. He say, you had a fever the first night. Thought I'd lose you before morning. Would that have troubled you? She asked before she could stop herself. He looked up sharply, gray eyes hard. Don't talk like that. You've got breath in your lungs. That means you've still got a chance. That's more than most get in these mountains. Her throat tightened. She wanted to tell him that she hadn't wanted a chance, that she had wanted the snow to take her, but something in his steady gaze silenced the words. Elias returned to his chair by the fire. Storm's not done yet, he sighed after a pause. Another day or two, maybe more. You'll have to stay here till it clears. She nodded. Though staying felt dangerous in Hitway, she couldn't name. This man had saved her life, yet his presence stirred something inside her that scared her more than the storm outside. The days passed in uneasy rhythm. Clara mended his torn shirts. Elias hunted, sublet wood, and brought back fresh snow to melt for water. They spoke little at first, but silence turned to small talk. Safe subjects like weather, supplies, or the mountains themselves. You here alone? She asked one evening as he fixed ear broken to been 6 winters. Now he sighed with thou at looking up. Doesn't it get lonely? He hesitated, then shrugged. Better lonely than haunted. She wanted to ask what haunted him but didn't. She understood the weight of ghosts too well. That night she woke to the sound of him moving about. Through half-open eyes she saw him kneeling by the fire, shirtless, wiping his skin with handfuls of snow. In the flickering light, a long, jagged scar ran down his shoulder and back. An ugly mark puckered on old. Her breath caught. He looked like a man carved from the mountain itself, strong, scarred, untamed. And yet the why he moved slow and deliberate carried the air of penance, like a man trying to wash away something deeper than dirt. When he turned, she closed her eyes quickly, pretending sleep, but the image, or the sin tie that scar burned behind her lids long after. By the next morning, awkwardness hung between them. Elias avoided her gaze, and she pretended not to notice. When she thanked him for the food he cooked, venison stew thick with wild herbs, he only nodded. When she tried to help clean, he waved her oh. Finally, she snapped. If you're going to glower at me day, I might as well go back into the snow. He looked up startled, then laughed. An honest, rough sound that filled the cabin. You've got spirit, I'll give you that. I'm not porcelain, Mr. Granger. You don't have to walk on eggshells around me, Elias. He sat after a moment. You can call me Elias. Clara, she replied softly. The sound of their names together in that small cabin felt like the beginning of something neither of them could yet name. That evening she found him by the window staring out at the storm-dark sky. Why do you life out here? She asked quietly. He didn't turn because it's what I deserve. No one deserves to be alone. He finally faced her, and in his eyes she saw Okia, lifetime of sorrow. You don't know what I've done. Then tell me. He looked away again. Not tonight. They sat by the fire after that, saying nothing. The wind howled outside, but the room was warm, lit by orange light and quiet breathing. Somewhere between one heartbeat and the next, something inside Clara began to thaw, the part of her that had been frozen long before the storm. She didn't know yet if she could trust him. She didn't even know if she could trust herself. But for the first time in months, she wanted to life, and for the first time in secret could trust years. Elias Granger wanted to be forgiven. The days that followed carried a rhythm as fragile as a spring ice. Clara woke each morning to the smell of coffee and wood smoke. Elias was always up before dawn, tending to chores or checking his traps, the quiet monotone man moving with purpose on care. She had never known such peace, but she also sensed something caged beneath his calm, festy sadness he wore. Like, light second skin. When she hummed softly one afternoon while sewing, he paused in his work, startled that song. He haven't heard it in years. My mother used to sing it, Clara replied, smiling faintly. It sounds like home, he murmured, though his eyes sighed. He hadn't had one in ear-long time. Each small moment knit them closer together. She cooked while he sipped logs and they ate by firelight, talking about things that didn't hurt, The stars, the color of the pines, the stubborn mule he once owned. But under Ephyr Ward lay something unspoken. The air between them carried warmth. Neither dared name. Then one morning the storm broke. Sunlight flooded the cabin for the first time in weeks. The warlit outside glittered white and endless. Elias set down his coffee cup. The pass might clear soon, he say. Oh, Clara answered, her voice soft. I can take you down to Fort Collins. From there you can catch at its stage anywhere you want, anywhere she wanted. The wards should have sounded like freedom, but they landed hay in her chest. Yes, she sighed finally. Thank you. He only nodded, though his jaw tightened. That evening they sat in silence, the fire crackling low. Clara tried to sew but pricked her finger twice. Elias watched her quietly. When she caught him looking, she smiled faintly. You watch all cades through me. He looked away embarrassed. Sorry, it's been since I had company. You mean since you let someone close? She said gently. He didn't answer, but the truth showed in the why. His hands clenched on his knees. That night, Clara woke to the sounded-off movement. Elias sat by the fire staring into the flames, his face carved with shadows. She rose from the bed. Norty went to him, wrapping a saya blanket around her shoulders. Can't sleep, she asked. Didn't mean to wake you. You didn't? She sat beside him. You have nightmares too, don't you? He sighed nothing for a long while, then nodded. Say I was hired to settle Gibanga and get I was to settle line the dispute. Shorts fired in the dark. One bullet went astray. You child died. His voice cracked. They say it wasn't my fault, but it was my gun, my aim. Clara reached for his hand, trembling. And you came here to punish yourself. I came here to stop being the man who did that. He saw eyes wet with shame. But every time I close my eyes, I see her. Clara held his rough hand between her palms. You can't change the past, Elias. But you saved me. That has to mean something. He looked at her then, as if seeing her for the first time. You think seeing one live erases the one I took? No, she said softly. But it means the man who pulled that trigger isn't the man sitting here now. Silence stretched between them. Then, almost without realizing it, she reached up and touched his scar. His breath caught Clara. He said her name more prayer than warning. I know we're both broken, she whispered. But maybe we can stop breaking. His hand came up to cradle her face, rough thumb brushing her cheek. The air between them felt alive, trembling with the weight of everything unsaid. When their Liebes met, it wasn't gentle. It was desperate, the kiss off two people who had forgotten what it meant to feel alive. She pressed closer, his warmth chasing away the cold that had lived inside her 4 months. When they finally parted, she was breathless. Elias. He touched his forehead to hers. Stay, he whispered, not just foreign tonight. Stay. She closed her eyes. Ask me again. When the snow melts, he smiled small and sad. Fair enough, but the peace didn't last. 3 days later, Clara heard it. The distant echo of hoof-beats carried on the main wind. Elias heard them too. He was out the door in seconds, rifle in hand. Stay inside, Clea ordered. Who is it? Don't know, but it's not a trapper. Moments later, the sound grew louder. 3 riders emerged from the trees, men dressed too fine for Montine Live. At their head rode Richard Hartley, looking smug as ever beneath his expensive coat. Well, he drawled, reining in his horse. Took some effort finding you, Clara. You gave me quite a chase. Elias leveled his rifle. Turn around. You're not welcome here. Richard laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. And you must be Elias Granger. Heard the stories about you. Killer gone hermit, living like a wolf. Tell me, has the widow kept you warm through those long nights? Leave Elias say it again. Foy low and deadly. Richard's smile widened. Or what? You'll add another ghost to your collection. The insult hit its mark. Elias's hands trembled on the rifle. Clara stepped forward, placing herself between them. Stop, she cried. No more blood. Not for me. Richard sneered, still trying to blame noble Clara. You're coming with me. You belong to me. No, she sighed fiercely. Not anymore. He moved to grab her wrists, but Elias was faster. The rifle cracked. The bullet struck the snow inches from Richard's boot. The next one. Elias sighed evenly. won't miss for a long moment. No one moved. Then Richard laughed again, hollow and cold. Enjoy your victory, Granger. It'll be short. I'll bring the law next time. He turned his horse, spitting in the snow. She'll come crawling back once she learns what kind of man you really are. They rode away, disappearing into the trees. Clara stood shaking, every muscle tight with fear and fury. Elias lowered the rifle, his chest rising hard with each breath. He'll come back, she whispered. I know. Then well, be ready. He looked at her. Really? Looked. Lulutulan saw not the fragile woman he'd carried from the snow, but someone fierce and unyielding. We face it together, he sighed together. She agreed. That night they sat by the fire, his arm around her head on his shoulder. The storm outside had passed, but another was brewing in their warlord. Still, for now, they had warmth and love, and the fragile peace of two souls who had chosen each other against odds. In the soft glow of the fire, she whispered the words that had started it. The words that now meant something entirely new. I don't want to be saved tonight. Elias kissed her hair. Then you'll be loved instead. Daja, and for the first time in their haunted lives, both believed it might just be